Right. Jen, I really appreciate your time. This is the third time we've actually spoken. I didn't realize, but we did an interview by phone. And then one of the best moments on the Jim Fannon Show, I think, was having the kids and you and the three-piece into the studio. And I'll give you the date. It was August 10th, 2014. I think you were camping out at a friend's place in Port Dalhousie. You brought the kids in. The station was closed, and they had the run of the place and literally ran the place. And just a great – I had them in the booth. Wasn't sure of Maceo's name, mispronounced it, and Van corrected me immediately with a little bit of attitude. Maceo, not Maceo.
That's so funny.
So yeah,
I remember it well. That was really fun.
Yeah, beautiful moment. So tell us a little bit about what you've been up to since. I hear that you've been in studio. That excites me. I didn't know that you'd never produced a studio album with the three-piece, but Stefan Crump and Jamie Foxx accompanying you. How did that go, and when's it going to be out, more importantly?
Sure. It has been, so much has happened since we were in your studio in 2014. And, I mean, there's lots to talk about, but just to respond to the immediate question, we've been making a Canadian trip, primarily to the Atlantic Canada, going to New Brunswick and Nova Scotia every August as a trio plus kids, as you mentioned. My husband, we've been collaborating for years with him, being really a fundamental ingredient in my songs on acoustic bass, Stefan Crump. And then our friend Jamie Foxx is a wonderful guitarist. And we've been doing this trip along with Stefan, and I have two boys who are now 13 and 9. Wow. You can do the math of what they were when we last met. But so we do this trip every August. It's like a combination family vacation with friend and music tour. And we go up to, our destination is Nova Scotia, where we play a few concerts and a festival. And so this past summer, we decided, while the band is warmed up, while we have a little bit of space and we can be in this sort of special environment away from the distractions of New York City, which is where we're based in Brooklyn. Let's record our album up in Nova Scotia. And we knew about a very a studio that's just oozing charisma, or I guess character is the more accurate word. So we recorded August 21st to 23rd, I believe, 2018. And then came back to New York, and I had to switch gears to my day job, which I've actually started only in 2016 as a full-time high school history teacher. So that started in September, and then just around the edges, I was able to finish some of the music part didn't need much work because it was very much like capturing moments in the studio. But we sort of had to pick between various takes and do some of that work, late nights, weekends after I've been doing my lesson plans and so on. Wow. And so the album is, currently being manufactured. I did a whole pledge music campaign, like Kickstarter or Indiegogo or, crowdfunding, where I had, engaging my supporters to pre-order, and that, helps not just finance the production of the record, but also just engage people in the process and also let you know, okay, how many people want to hear this thing? How many should I end up making? Because in this, as much like press as I've had, I've been on national TV, I've done all kinds of radio and, print media and had all these, great reviews. It's really about the word of mouth. And it's really about those intimate relationships that you make over time. And sometimes those intimate relationships, or at least relationships, take hold over the digital realm in this crazy time we're in. So I did a whole crowdfunding. People were pre-ordering, giving me back and forth feedback, even up to before the recording, where I was still writing some new songs through the July and leading into early August. And so I'm not sure exactly how much. I mean, I know it'll be available through my website and iTunes and I guess that evil beast Amazon, but I'm not sure how much I'll do a big official release. I haven't really decided, because that kind of ends up being in the indie music world, it's whatever. So we'll see, but it'll certainly be available to people. First, I'm sending it out to the people who pledged, and then I'll deal with the next layer.
Awesome. Now, did you say you're teaching high school?
I am.
What came over you? What was the idea behind that?
Well, I've always been, even as a songwriter and performer, I always have that impulse to, it's not the, I love history. I love, the questions, I always, when we're talking about what's going on in the world, my mind wants to go to, well, what happened before? How did we get here? And it's not a distinctively American impulse to look at the past and look at root causes of things and to deal with complexity. But I've always had that impulse, and even, as a songwriter, I think sometimes those ideas that exchange, which I see as so fundamental to the democratic dialogue and the whole concept of our people engaged in the decisions made on their behalf. I see it as history being a basic understanding, as being sort of a requisite to that. But I always, and over the years, I'd be performing, and somebody would tell me they were a teacher, and I'd say, "Oh, you're my hero. Someday I'm going to do that in my next life." And I did. When I first moved to New York City, I was actually a music teacher at a private school for a few years before my touring schedule made that difficult. But when it all comes down to it, I was looking at the numbers, looking at the bank statements, and it was having two freelance musicians in the house has run its course. And, my husband is a full-time touring bassist and composer, and he does excellent work. He's very well regarded, and I've been well regarded as well. But my music has so much been akin to a small business, where it's you make money, you invest it back. You're spending money on publicity, on paying the band, on studio time, and all these things. I haven't been so much hired out for my musical services. So I'm not making that clean income I don't know if clean is the word, but I think, it's always been about investing back in the business, and that's been, it's super challenging. And our kids are a little bit older, so they're not as requiring of the kind of childcare, which makes a teacher's salary kind of a joke. So I went back to school, got my master's in education, and took a bunch of graduate history courses as well. And now I am certified in teaching in New York City public schools.
What are the lessons like? What do you like to hit on? What's your favorite subjects?
Well, I've done a few different things over the years, because I've been sort of in my initial entry, then I had a few temporary jobs. Somebody is out for the semester, or they just got a surgery, or things like that. And also, just what does the department need? You have to be a little bit jack of all trades. So I've taught about American history through the lens of music. That was sort of my dream path, my dream curriculum. I've done a curriculum called History of Black Music, where it's like how much you actually learn about America in the 18th, 19th, 20th centuries through the music that has come through this amazing mix of cultures that through violence and oppression somehow has created a lot of beauty and resilience. I've taught economics and looked at issues like scarcity and even topics like the refugee crisis through an economic lens. The economics of recycling, the economics of, different things, and looking at investment and how, what have different world religions, what have their scriptural takes been on interest. It's like, wow, it's interesting that all of the world religions have some holy texts that say you shouldn't loan money at interest, yet our entire financial system is based on it. I've taught government. I've gotten into the U.S. Constitution, the Second Amendment, kids writing essays for and against repeal of our very strangely worded constitutional right to bear arms. And then this year I'm doing global history, looking at some of the classical civilizations in China and India and Greece and Rome, the three Abrahamic faiths, how much they're emerging, which in this political realm, people are just so, people who claim to be religious being so basely ignorant about religion. We were looking at the foundations of Islam and the life of Muhammad and the teachings in the Quran, as a historical matter, because you have to know, if you're studying history, you have to know about, and now we're starting to look at the Crusades and Christianity's impact in medieval Europe. But, at one point there was an article in the New York Times where they were talking about how much of the political dialogue, or a dialogue's not the word, political rhetoric, particularly on, pretty much exclusively on the right side, the right-wing side of things, saying, Islam is not a religion, it's a political ideology, it's a guise to implement world domination, it's not really a belief system. So, my ninth grade students, 14-year-olds, having spent, some time studying the fundamental premises of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism and their historical origins, then, challenging them, okay, guys, write a paragraph explaining, here's the definition of a religion, here's the definition of a political ideology. They need your help in understanding that Islam is indeed a belief system, a religion. It's not politics. It has, like all religions, there's been lots of political ins and outs over the centuries. But anyway, so those are all kinds of things.
Wow.
Lots to talk about.
Yeah, especially the religious aspect. I think in every holy book there's so many similarities that stories are almost identical. Like almost every major religion had a flood,
Right. And weird ideas of virginity come up a lot, or female sexuality. And so many beautiful poetic ideas about love and hospitality and generosity and universal brotherhood, and then just horrific violence and anger, come across in all these. So, that's something that you end up, trying to impress upon the kids. It's like, all these people have been horrible. All of us have been great,
Yeah.
And here we have, Buddhists in Myanmar, the religion most renowned for its teachings of peace and serenity, undertaking a genocide. So we're all the same. We're all the same. We just dress up in different ways.
For sure. Now, I would ascertain that the foundation of Western society was built on a Judeo-Christian type of religious foundation, and I also would think that the teaching of world history, and specifically the genocides and the man's propensity to kill off whatever doesn't look like him, and coupled with world religion, do you think if that was focused on a little bit more in school, especially the world religions, that we would, become a little bit more tolerant if we knew essentially, a little bit more about the Quran or the holy book of any religion? I mean, what are your thoughts on
yeah. Well, the human impulse still has, prejudices against strangers and biases towards sticking to our own type. But I think, if there is more awareness, more education, people are going to be less easily preyed upon by demagogues and less inclined to follow. So people are still going to have those impulses. It's whether those impulses are played out on a wide scale by opportunistic politicians. But, and going back to the Judeo-Christian thing, certainly, Europe, the West, Judeo-Christian, all that, but also pre-Judeo-Christian, Greek and Roman, and also to the degree to which the achievements of the Greeks and the Romans were preserved by the Muslim world during the Dark Ages, when Europe was barely able to, hold itself from, complete Stone Age, that in the East you had a lot of the achievements not only being advanced, where we had the Arabic numeral system emerging out of Iraq, where we had medical science, the scientific method, so many things that in those times when Europe was in chaos were not only the Greek and Roman achievements being preserved and built upon, but you had new advances that our society is also based on. So yes, that knowledge is important.
Certainly. And you touched on briefly, the strange political times. I kind of think like every era, we've always said, oh, this is a strange time because progress happens and, it's foreign to us. So I'm not sure that we're any different than any other age that's ever been on the planet, but it certainly seems more polarized now. I mean, especially in the States. Well, it's not much different in Canada. The right and the left, in my opinion, when I first started to do the deep dive on this, my feeling on it is that the right and left were further apart than they've ever been. And I also look at it almost like men and women, same thing. They seem to be at each other's throats. And the more research I've done on why, I've come to believe that we're not actually further apart. It's just the extremes seem to have more of a voice now. And the moderate middle that's in the fat part of the bell curve of the distribution is sitting there shaking our heads, wondering why these idiots on the right and left won't shut the hell up. And it's almost like we're being convinced that these extremists have become the majority when actually it's the reverse. The opposite is true. The moderate middle is the majority. We're just silent. So what's your take on the apparent division on between the left and right and men and women these days? Do you see it the same way, or do you think it's actually that bad?
I don't know about the polarization thing because, on the one hand, the right, left, at least in the States, and I would suspect to some degree in Canada, the center has been moving to the right. I mean, if you look at economic policies, if you look at a certain acceptance of what is the social safety net, if you look at militarism, and I love President Obama, but a lot of the substance of his policies were not that different from Nixon.
Right,
because Nixon was coming from where the status quo was more to the left. So he was having to move rightward from that. Obama was having to move leftward, barely, from a status quo that had moved considerably rightward through the 80s and 90s. So, to my mind, I'm of the left. I always have been. I was raised that way. But I also, as somebody who is interested in history, you look at where has there been progress that is now universally across right and left embraced. Investment in infrastructure, investment in education, access to education being a universally accepted value, having people being cared for in their retirement, having the government invest in science to the degree where you have development, say, science and technology, where you have something like the internet, which the seed money comes where? From the government. Having government being seen as an important place where we invest in our future, that is something that has been consistently pushed by the left over the opposition of the right. So I can't help but say now, there are certain things that, the right accepts, or even, racial progress, like the right no longer can explicitly say, President Trump accepted, but, everybody loves Martin Luther King. Everybody loves Martin Luther King was looked at by the right wing, by the conservatives, as a communist, dangerous man. Mm-hmm. Now everybody loves him. So everything that the left has put forward has been accepted by the right eventually as being and not just acceptable, but necessary for the most part. And then when people rail against government intervention in the economy, we still, even in our supposedly left-wing New York City, have the government deciding to give handouts of $1 billion to Amazon, tax breaks. We still have subsidies going to oil companies. We still have massive tax breaks and government handouts going to corporations across right and left, because the center has moved to the right.
Interesting.
So, if you look at the actual facts, we're all repeating this stuff. Oh, we're polarized, this and that. But, what do people actually want? They want what the left has put forward. But the thing is, the reality is complex. And, and I'm speaking out as a partisan, the left wing, the Democrats, the whatever, the liberals tend to acknowledge and embrace complexity and sometimes speak in terms that the average, overwhelmed, struggling to survive person does not find compelling. Whereas if you look at Trump phenomenon, he is unabashed about speaking 3, 4, 5 words at a time and repeating them to whatever extent they're outright lies. I was just watching a clip last night, all through his campaign. I am the law and order president. I am law and order. Law and order. So people hear that, they're like, oh, okay, law and order. Hillary Clinton just went on like a 5-paragraph discourse about the intricacies of criminal justice reform. And I'm going to go with the guy who says law and order, even if his entire so-called business career has been based on subverting the law. And his entire cabinet and administration has been about bending the corners of the spirit, if not the actual letter of the law. So that's my take.
And you touched on Obama, and similar to Obama, I think when our lefty prime minister came in, Justin Trudeau, I'm traditionally
Justin, he's a little neoliberal.
Yeah,
he's adorable,
and I've tended to be a lefty as well. I mean, my first election was 1993 for the Green Parties, for the Green Party in Niagara Center here, and I ran probably 8 or 9, maybe 10 times as a Green, in addition to some municipal campaigns and all that kind of stuff, and only because I thought it was important for us to have the conversation. Nobody really knew what a carbon tax was, in '93, or how to tax pollution,
which is a market-based, moderate solution that was forwarded by conservative or moderate organizations, and now somehow it's seen as some lefty thing.
Well, and it's a certain amount of wealth redistribution as well, but it comes from the taxes of people that are doing harmful things to the environment. So, I went down that road, and all my beliefs meshed with the left for a long time, and I've gone through. I'm kind of a loyal guy by nature. I'm loyal to my Philadelphia Eagles. Loyalty is one of my things that runs deep with me. And I didn't realize that, now I just turned 50 years old. And for the last few years, I've been open to listening to the conservative pundits and talk show hosts like Crowder and Shapiro and crying out loud, I've done a deep dive on Jordan Peterson's work. I'm fascinated by the big 5 personality types, and I think that explains a whole lot of why we have such different takes on politics and sex and things like that. And so for many years, I've been really adjusting to the fact that I'm not 24 years old anymore. I don't believe everything that I used to believe, and I didn't realize it would be so painful coming off of my old beliefs that in some cases weren't well debated or researched. I just fell in line with the left-wing talking points. But what's really gotten me lately is the idea that words are violence, and that you can't say that here, and that if you criticize the Muslim faith in Canada, it's actually against the law, and you can be taken before the Human Rights Tribunal and convicted with very little evidence or jurisprudence. And so, as a lefty socially and as a righty fiscally, I've had this huge swing that's been painful to come off of what I used to believe, but everything for me seems to hinge on freedom of speech. So what are your thoughts on your traditional lefty views and how they may have changed or not with our struggle with you can't say that here? Twitter banned a girl in Megan Murphy in Vancouver for tweeting that men are men and women are women, and men can't become women no matter what the hormone level of their supplements or their sex change. I mean, like, I know Twitter's a business, they can do whatever they like, but it just seems like the right is being shut down by the left saying, no, you can't say those things here. And for me, the fundamental cornerstone of democracy is being able to say what you think. And that's how we learn, because if you say what you think and it's incorrect, you'll be corrected right quickly and you'll learn from it and probably don't say those things anymore. But that's how we think, is with words and speech. So I wonder if you've got any concerns with the freedom of speech in the States.
Well, there's a number of things you said. You said you're a fiscal conservative, which again, in my partisan view, is who's been fiscally conservative, who's been concerned about balancing budgets, who's been leaving at least the American government in more prone towards surplus than deficit, the left. So the right no longer has any claim, historically, factually, rhetorically, sure, they'll say I'm a fiscal conservative, but there is, like, since the 1980s, they have not, you look consistently in the United States, maybe in Canada it's different, fiscal conservatism, or at least fiscal responsibility, has been owned by the left. As far as freedom of speech, I think that it's a fun thing for people to speak about in simple terms. It's not something I'm concerned about, and because I think that it's been hysteria and these kind of extreme examples that have been, and people profiling also, like college students and so on. Oh, these college students all got up in arms and they wouldn't let this person speak. It's like, they're college students, dudes. Like, this is what they do. This is their job. They're adolescents. You know, like in many cases, like technically they are adolescents. So stop looking at this as a microcosm of society. It's like, you know, I reread Lord of the Flies as some allegory, which is what the author intended, of society, that we're in a Locke or a Hobbesian world. It's like, well, those are also prepubescent boys, you know. So what they're yes and no as far as illuminating what's going on in society. But I think when it comes, I mean, I think all these things are anecdotal that get amplified into hysteria, like, oh my gosh, you can't say what you want. But it's not something that I feel is. I'm not worried about us not having freedom of speech. I'm worried about actual, you know, as the journalist Bob Woodward spoke to, like an actual assault on truth. But, you know, so often what people are saying as examples of, like, oh, this person wasn't allowed to say this offensive thing. It's like, well, yeah, we should have a real debate about whether people should be allowed to say things on whichever private or public platforms. But let's also look at the fact that that was a lie, what that person said. You know, what that Twitter thing you just quoted, that seems to be not factual and just intentionally inflammatory for whatever commercial or personal reasons that person made. So, you know, for instance, in the high school where I teach, there was a student who over the summer, and it just came out in the fall, had made a private Instagram post that was extremely, I didn't see it, but a few posts that were anti-Semitic, racist, misogynist, violent, and generally terrifying, with a disclaimer attached saying, I'm not a racist, I don't believe these things, I'm just saying it to make fun of people who believe these things. But my school had, which maybe some people would get upset about, had a zero tolerance. They said, these things are not acceptable. You can't say these things. But they didn't kick him out. What we've done, and it was extremely labor intensive, but I think it is kind of what needs to happen on the mass scale, is we had restorative circles with the student with, he had a suspension, he had some disciplinary action, but then it was just a series of circles where people spoke about the actual tangible harm that was caused by seeing these posts. Teachers talking about that they were actually scared to come to school. Friends of the students saying that they felt betrayed. And having a candid, intimate conversation about what are the implications of these words. So hard to implement, labor intensive. But instead of just shutting down, you can't say things, it's like, yeah, you can't say them. And let's talk about why. Let's talk about how words have consequences. Let's talk about the actual facts and history that make these words inflammatory. Let's talk about, you don't want to be inconvenienced by being told that your words are unacceptable. Let's look at the history of how words like what you've said have led to genocide. So I'm sorry that you're inconvenienced and you feel censored, but historically, what you have just said echoes actual death. People are so up in arms about trans, about, gay rights, the gay agenda, about people's right to have their identity and their presentation be coherent with how they conceive of themselves. And you have to ask, the people who are up in arms against this, is this really a problem for you? Are you really so inconvenienced by somebody who has a visible Adam's apple wearing a dress and a wig? Is this really a problem for you? Because if you look at the facts, if you look at sexual predation, if you look at any kind of measure of social health, as far as societally, you're not going to find anything that tells you that these people that you're targeting are a problem for you. Are these people more inclined to be murdered on the streets? Gay and trans people? Are, people who identify as queer? Are these people more inclined to be hungry? Are these people more inclined to be victimized? Yeah. But are they more inclined to cause a problem for you? No. So calm the fuck down, It's say what you need to say, but let's put it in a little context. This is not a problem for you, so stop acting like it is. Stop acting like your marriage is somehow degraded, if that's a word, degraded, I guess is the word, by somebody else's same-sex marriage. So, you could tell I get a little annoyed.
Yeah, the passion more than leaks out, and I share that same passion.
In the profanity.
For music and for politics, and, I started saying, the Obama administration, I was filled with such hope. Here's a new day. At the same time, I was like, wait a second, are the states more sexist than they are racist? Because I predicted that, Trump would win type of thing. And here we have a black president before we have a woman president. But anyways, going back to this idea of hope of this Democrat coming into office, it's a new day. We've got a black president. In Canada, I was filled with the same hope. Here comes a young, son of a former prime minister, whether you like him or not. He's certainly not his father's son. He's very different in many ways. But, even with this whole parity of gender-based cabinet positions, in the beginning I was like, okay, I can get behind this. But it seems like the system, and you spoke, I think you alluded to it a little bit about your hope for Obama, and then the machine gets a hold of them, and somehow they're towing the same line that every other president has: big business, subsidies to big oil, not really putting people first and social programs first. No,
I wouldn't. I mean, it's a matter of degree. It's just, and I wouldn't say, I think, to me, you're presenting too much of a dichotomy. Oh, so hopeful. Oh, so disappointed. Oh, this is going to be a new era. And it's like, I've never been on that thing. And if you look at what was done, I mean, I'm not so detailed about Trudeau, but my impression is, yeah, I'll take like 90% of what he's doing over Stephen Harper. Yeah, it's not these people. We don't want kings, but yet we want the people that we like to be able to do things without compromise. there's a balance of powers. There's a private economy. There is, we're still in capitalist societies where businesses, are allowed a large degree of discretion in how they run things, and we are not inclined to regulate them to the degree that they should be. So, I mean, if you look at the actual structures of government, none of this is that surprising. And there is, on the left, there's always an impulse to be like, look at where the other side has a good point. It's like, oh, well, yeah, it's true. We don't want businesses to be too constricted from meeting the demands of their shareholders. We don't want, to totally hamper free enterprise. So, and sometimes there's maybe too much credit given to the other side, and that is, I think, the liberal impulse to take all things into account and also not want to be extreme,
right.
Unless you're like extreme left, unless you're Stalin, but that's not what anybody's ever aspired to. So
right.
I mean, I'm just doing it more in terms of a clear eye, but did the stuff that most people didn't even pay attention to as far as what Obama administration forwarded, is that like incredibly powerful and important, and did it move us forward? Yes. And the impulses, like the handouts to the auto industry, that was absolutely crucial in rescuing our economy from free fall. The environmental progress as far as, again, with the auto industry, raising fuel economy standards, absolutely crucial.
What about the banks?
What about the banks?
Yeah.
Well, that again, it goes back to the earlier point. Nobody wants to, everybody wants to listen to them and say, I mean, partly because of their success in making their world so incredibly complex that most of us have no idea what they're talking about. Okay, we'll trust you and do what you say. But, people could, I think, rightly say that the failure to really crack down on financial fraud and their casino mentality and their dominance and monopolization, that would have been nice to have come out of the Democratic administration.
Wow, I didn't. Our conversations, we've never had a long-form conversation like this that wasn't interrupted by, commercials every 9 minutes. So I appreciate your takes on all of this, but and we can get back to it. But I'd really like to spend some time on the music. I don't want to keep you all day here, so we could debate politics until we're blue in the face, and I'm not sure that anything would be solved by it. But I really appreciate your take on it. It's an interesting take, and I wonder. I know that you're active with some foundations in the States there. Why Hunger is one of them. But before we touch on that, does your music have a history of activism-based writing or style or performance or anything like that? Or do you try to remove, or do you see yourself completely removed from it? I know some of your songs are certainly pointed at things like hunger and issues like that, but is a majority of your music based in real life and politics?
Absolutely.
Oh.
But I want to make things that have a certain resonance beyond the immediate moment. And I always try and take a step back. My speaking here also as a reflection of the times we're in, but I'm going to, I'll be more explicit about my horror at the Trump administration than I would put in a song. In a song, I'm more inclined to sort of take a step back and also look at how we're all party to this. What is it about us that that is attracted, us as a species, that is attracted to the 5-word phrase and oversimplified idea. What is it about us that, that the structure of our economy and the demands of modern life keep us from being able to fulfill our obligations as citizens, to be informed, to understand that public policy is complicated. I've written, I have a song that I wrote many years ago called Passive People, which is about that. We are passive people, but it's a song of empathy. It's like we're passive because we're too busy trying to survive. On my new album, which is called Desert or Sea, which I wrote the song Desert or Sea, the title track, as it's kind of an intimate family song, like thinking about what's the future decisions you're going to make as a family unit, where you're going to be, what you're going to do. But in making it the title track now, I realized that the title also speaks to climate change, because that's what we're looking at, the world being either flooded in some areas or desertification in other areas. It's this, this increasing dichotomy. I have a song called Secret, which was sort of unofficially commissioned by the pastor of a small Presbyterian, congregational church in New England, writing to me poignantly because his teenage daughter was realizing that she is queer and feeling an existential threat coming from our government. And he said, can you write a song to make her feel better? Wow. So I wrote a song called Secret, which, ultimately, I don't know if it did anything for this teenager, but it made me feel at least that I had a channel for my rage, which I just expressed. It's like, and the refrain of that song is, we won't turn back. The secret's out forever. It's like people's existence is real. And it's not your problem, and stop pretending that it is. So yeah, I have a new song. Some of these debates, which they're ancient debates about, does someone really love our country? What does it mean to be a patriot? But I have a song called Drinking Song, which sort of meditates on the notion of patriotism in the context of some of our contemporary debates about whether you have to go through the rituals of standing for the anthem, and this goes back to this whole simplicity thing. Yeah, call it a polarization of right or left. I would call it a polarization between intellectually, intellectually people find that a threatening word, an idea, a dialogue of what patriotism means versus empty rituals of, wave the flag, wear the T-shirt, put the hand on heart, versus actual service to a country and its values, which calls for constant reinvigoration through inquiry, through public policy, through active engagement. So, our national anthem, Star Spangled Banner, had its origins, it was written by a slave owner, who the melody of it came from an old British drinking song. So I have a song called Drinking Song, which is kind of talking about these things which I just spoke about.
Wow.
Of what does it mean to be a patriot, and how historically in our country, if you do a poll on patriotism and optimism and belief in American values, they're typically the people who are most patriotic are then the people who have most had to struggle to be accepted in the full citizenship
Any hope before we move on from politics? We could get stuck on this. Any hope for the current administration that we come out of this better on the other side on anything?
I think it's pretty awesome how women, you said earlier, women and men not getting along. I don't see that. I don't see it in those terms. But the degree to which women are after, we're talking about millennia. We're talking about all of human society. Women just saying no. That to me is exciting, and I do feel that the cat is out of the bag, and I don't feel like it's gonna go back to the same kind of, oh, well, that's just the way things are.
Right.
There does seem to be a okay, that's been the way things are, but it's not gonna be the same. It's not gonna be just blindly accepted.
So out of this, a certain amount of progress has been attained for women and other groups, would you say?
I don't know that the progress has been attained, but the people are just they're not sitting back anymore.
Right.
So to whatever degree but we certainly are getting closer towards actual representation in our Congress.
Interesting.
I think we're at 24%, whereas it used to be more like under 20, and now it's people are saying, well, it should be 50, 49, 48, 52. I don't think having women in charge. I feel like it's condescending to say, oh, we wouldn't have any war if women. It's like, no, but we want representation of people who understand different perspectives. That's just common sense.
For sure. So, with a really rough segue, how many songs are you going to have on the new album? Are they all original music?
Oh, good question. There are 10 songs, cool. And they're all my own except for one is it's from 1990 by the late great lesser known, I guess not in the most famous tier of jazz singers of the golden age, but very well respected Abby Lincoln, a song called "The World Is Falling Down," which we recorded for the album. But the rest of them are mine. So, I've mentioned the title. The title is "Desert or Sea," and that's one of the songs. Okay. There's a drinking song I mentioned, which actually most of the songs, or all of the songs, have all been written by me, words and music, aside from the Abby Lincoln song. But drinking song actually was a real collaboration with my guitarist, Jamie Foxx, where the guitar part, I wrote the melody and the words, but the actual musical, we were going back and forth, trading musical ideas. And so that's a real collaboration. There is Secret, which I mentioned, which speaks to human rights, particularly for people whose sexual or gender identity has been devalued, marginalized. What are some others? There's a song called Home, which is kind of a love song about, making your home where you are, collaborating, solving problems as a couple. There is, what else is on here? There's an old song, which we might have even played in the studio, or maybe not, but a song called Gold, which is something we've done forever in our live performances, and it's a real jam out kind of song.
Right.
So, and there's I think the last song, drinking song was very up to the wire as far as the studio and the tour in the summer, but there's another new song called Gentleness, which I actually wrote for my younger son, just celebrating his personality.
What are the kids up to? Tell us a little bit about what they're interested in these days. They don't have a shortage of personality, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, Maceo, being 13, he's away on he's actually on a sleepover. It was an overnight trip to New Jersey with a bunch of friends and a friend's dad who took a crew to a birthday sleepover party to another house. So he's off with his friends. He plays guitar under duress. Yeah, he's actually a really good guitar player, but he complains every minute of it. He hasn't found the bug outside of our coercion.
Okay.
And then Van is more enthusiastic, though still complaining and procrastinating. Great piano player. He works pretty hard and digs in. And you know, this morning he loves projects and being enlisted. This morning I got him to help me. We made crepes for breakfast.
What's that?
And like crepe. Well, I don't know what's the Canadian at crepes. I'm giving it the French crepe. You know.
Yeah. Okay, I got you.
Skinny pancakes that you roll stuffing inside.
Yeah.
So we made the batter and put them on the pan and the butter and so on. And yesterday he was helping me also do some of the stuff. I'm mailing out. I don't have the CDs yet, but people who were supporting the album Desert or Sea also, you know, ordered some of my previous releases, because this is the first trio album, but
right.
I have like, I don't know, depending on how you count, like eight or nine previous recordings.
Right.
So some of them people were buying as part of.
Is it The Reckoning I got from you inventory on vinyl? Was that the one I got on vinyl, The Reckoning? I think it's a picture
Reckoning, yeah, that's my latest one, which came out 2014.
Yeah. No, great album. It sounds great on the vinyl, too.
Thank you.
And, yeah, I'm really looking forward to the new stuff coming out. And Into the Mystic, one of my favorite Van Morrison, one of my favorite tunes of all time. Just, it's nice to see that blowing up on YouTube. 10 years old, coming up on 400,000 views. So that's something that's really popped for you for sure, eh?
Yeah, I didn't monetize it because it's not my song. Maybe I should have wiggled around the copyright there, but we did. Somebody saw it there and reached out to us about licensing it for a TV show, and it did show up. Our version of Into the Mystic did show up in. It was on the Sci-Fi Channel. It was a science fiction show called Defiance.
Okay.
That had aliens and such things. So that was a nice little, you know, made a few bucks from that. That we split with Van Morrison, and he approved.
Wow.
His lawyers approved of the song being used.
Amazing.
So so we keep on doing it. I think you'll like. It's different, and it's not Van Morrison, but the Abby Lincoln song. I think you'll appreciate that, because it's a great song. It was really fun to put our take on it.
Well, I haven't heard anything that didn't blow me away so far. I mean, your presence on stage is just amazing, and you know, I often leave the interview without failing to impress upon my guest, you know, how important music is to so many people, and that it really, in case nobody has acknowledged you for this lately, it gets us through some really strange and sometimes really broken times where we're struggling to find ourselves, or we're just beat down. And I mean, I don't need to tell you this. You've found your own solace probably in other people's work as far as, being addicted to a certain album or a certain song. And I use addictive with finger quotes, obviously, but, it's become the soundtrack of our lives and just so important to getting over and getting through and making it okay or helping us with, depression or sorrow or whatever it is we're fighting. So, you're no exception when it comes to that, and your music has played an important role. I just brought out the vinyl again about a week ago, and just when you obsess about a CD or an album over and over and over and over for months, then it's time to put it away for a little while. And then when you bring it out again, it's like an old love. It's like an old memory that you're like, wow, I forgot how much I really enjoyed this. And then it triggers all those memories of the time that you used it as a crutch to get through life, So thank you for your music. It's been such a gift to me, for one, and probably more than a gift for many, many people. I don't know if you're into reading YouTube comments, but there's got to be a whole lot of them that say just basically thank you for the gift, So thank you.
Well, thank you, Jim, and I can't wait to send you the new one, and hopefully it has it serves its purpose for you.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to hearing it again, and maybe we'll splice some songs if it's okay. I know it hasn't been released yet, but would you mind if it gets spliced into the video of the interview? Oh
no, okay. I'd be honored. Yeah.
Okay, and is any of it video content or is it all audio?
I haven't made any videos yet.
Okay.
That pesky teaching job getting in the way.
Yes.
But yeah, I'll at some point it'll happen.
Yeah.
There'll be some.
Nothing beats bringing Van and Maceo in for Go Away with the pillow fight on the bed with all the laundry.
Yeah. No, I'm very proud of myself for that idea.
Yeah, no,
it was like, oh, how can we make this all come alive?
And then we played that whole song, which was, not done very often on AM terrestrial radio. But in listening to the old show, which is on podcast, I think we got some clips on YouTube as well, but mostly on podcast. We played that whole song coming back, and another gift. But I always send that video out as an example of, you've never heard Jen Chapin, Harry Chapin's daughter. We didn't even touch on that. Check out this video, and it's such a fun video with the kids tossing stuffed animals at you, and just the lyrics of the song. You just go away. How many times have we wanted that for a loved one?
Yeah. Anyway. That is it. Cool. So I'll send you some MP3s and feel free to share in your artful way, and I'll help spread the word. I'm not gonna, as I said, I'm not sure when I'm gonna really officially release the album.
Okay.
I'm gonna focus on my immediate supporters, but I'll include your community of listeners in the first line. So I should have it like Christmas Eve.
Wow.
Cool. So I'll even, if people want to PayPal me, I had a whole system through pledgemusic.com through the crowdfunding as far as pre-orders, but my email's jen@jenchapin.com. I'll send some out for people who are dying to hear it.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. And I guess it wouldn't be right if we didn't touch on Why Hunger just before I let you go. Like I said, I don't want to keep you. You've been so generous, very generous with your time throughout the years with me. So I appreciate that. But it wouldn't be right if we didn't touch on Why Hunger and the work that you're doing down there with that organization.
Yeah, well, given that I have these two full-time jobs of teaching and music, I've been less active than historically. At one point, I was the chair of the board of directors, and it was a big part of my volunteer life. But the organization as so much developed over the decades. We would love to be out of existence, but the strength of our work really comes from our fact-based recognition that the most promising, the most sustainable solutions to hunger and poverty come from the grassroots. And so we're a grassroots support organization that helps community organizations around the U.S., in Canada, and around the world build alliances, build capacity, go beyond just sort of providing handouts to actually fomenting social change and amplifying the voices of people who are poor and hungry. In our country, there's still this fundamental ignorance that people choose to be poor or that they're lazy, and a refusal, again, on the right to do basic arithmetic of what salaries, the average salary actually entails when held against the cost of living. You have just real, lack of curiosity, lack of empathy of what it's like to pay the bills. And most people in our country, and I'm sure in your country as well, who are making use of emergency food from soup kitchens, food pantries, they are from working families. So either they or somebody in their household is working as much as they can. And, we have this thing where people are put into part-time work so that they're less eligible for benefits. And people put in the servants economy where they don't know their schedules until a few days in advance, and they're scrambling for childcare. They're taking care of elderly parents. They're trying to decide between paying for prescription medications and paying for school supplies for their kids, let alone rent and food. So it just comes down to that we've just accepted that people could be working part-time, full-time, and not be able to support themselves in a way that 40 years ago was not reality. And so, I always say that the basic answer to hunger is wages. Just people just aren't paid enough for honest labor. And, everything's put in well, look at this person. They went from being a janitor to being a CEO. It's well, you know what? We still need janitors. Being a janitor is an honest job that should be compensated. It's not all about moving on. It's about, honoring dignified work that is required in our society. And we still devalue, say, home health care aides, people who take care of our elderly, people who take care of the handicapped are living in poverty. People who work in restaurants, who harvest the fields, people who work in food industries are most likely to be hungry, most likely to be poor. The irony on that is just lost on the wider population. And so it's really just having the voices of people who are struggling be out there and helping build capacity of organizations where people are helping themselves, advocating for themselves, making changes to government policy because they know what needs to happen. So that's what Why Hunger is about. And especially we're really strong on promoting agroecology, where you're taking some modern technology and scientific progress when it comes to agriculture, and you're using that to synergize with traditional family farm-based practices, which, decades of research has shown is actually much more effective in not only higher yields of production, but in keeping people in sustainable, dignified lifestyles in agriculture. we have this well-financed lie that super high-tech, super mechanized monoculture farming, GMOs and such, are the future and are required for feeding the world. And that's not actually borne out by the evidence. And, when people ask about GMOs, I point out it's not so much about, GMOs cause cancer. That may be the case. We don't really have definitive scientific evidence. And, of course, there's a vast variety of genetically modified foods. And people have been breeding food, crossbreeding, coming up with new varieties. For millennia. Corn was the indigenous Mexicans and Guatemalans are who created it as a food staple back in the day. But it's really about when corporations try and take away farmer knowledge, sterilize seeds to put people into this cycle of having to get pesticides and get certain varietals, which may not be what is best for their farm. They just get sort of forced into it by the power of these mega corporations. So that's where GMOs, it's when you're taking away ownership of food from people and putting it in the hands of multinational corporations, why hunger always takes the stance that food is a human right. And I think most people agree with us.
Jen Chapin, I really appreciate your time. I love you for the generosity that you've showed the show, and thanks for the time again today. Just on the way out, maybe you could let us know how we can get a hold of you, how we can support your new album, maybe throw you a couple bucks, get on the list for the new CD. And,
sure. Well, the campaign for pre-order was successful and funded at 124%. But I can't. That website through pledgemusic.com is closed.
Okay. But
as I said, people could just shoot me an email. I'll post something on your thread.
Okay.
I'll do as far as especially shipping from Canada, which has unfortunately gotten a little bit burdensome, but or shipping to Canada. But if people want to get a hold of the record, they will certainly. Your special group of listeners should certainly be able to get it. So I'll share that information. I'm going to try and grade some essays first. And because I always procrastinate it.
Should we shout out?
By tonight I'll share that.
Should we shout out to high school? Would the kids enjoy that if you were if you promote?
Show up. Yeah, sometimes kids are like, "Oh, I found a video of you on YouTube."
You didn't shout out to school, or you taught? What's the matter with you?
Yeah, well, you have to. The kids. It's about them. It's not about me and my little career on the side. So we'll be in touch.
All right, I appreciate your time. Be well. Give my best to Stefan and Jamie and the two kids. Well, they're not so much kids anymore. 13 and 9.
They're definitely still kids.
9 and 5.
They're just They're not babies.
Yeah. Well, I was just listening to the show on the podcast when Van was correcting my pronunciation of Maceo.
Yeah, that's funny.
He was militant about it, and I loved it. I have nothing but good memories of them running around the studio. Well, more than the studio, they had the whole main floor of the station there.
Yeah, it was great. Good stuff.
Yeah, no, it was a good time. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much, and we'll touch you up. Hopefully, maybe in the new year after the album's out, and we'll take it in a few other directions that we failed to touch on today. But I know it's Sunday and it's family day. For me, it's football. And
nice.
My Eagles don't play till 8 o'clock tonight, but scrapping for their playoff lives. But so I appreciate your time on Family Day, and give my best to the crew, and hope to talk to you soon. So
thank you.
All right, we'll talk soon.
Bye, Jim.
Bye. Jen Chapin. Wow, that was great. I'm just going to sign off here. Maybe we've already done that. So, thanks for listening. Thanks for the comments. Check her out on YouTube. You can do that. Her website, and they will, her Facebook group, they can link you to all the causes that she's involved with. The new album's coming out. She said she would have her hands on it Christmas Eve, so we hope to get that in your hands if you're looking for it. I know she's done a few gigs. She played in the alley behind Murphy's. She played on the Murphy's patio, which is out back in Hogan's Alley there. Wow, and they packed the place. She did play a gig at Mate Cafe, who I should thank Chris Lowe. Chris Lowe's for actually lending her to me before that gig. He was perfectly fine with me picking her up before her performance at Mate, so she came into the studio with the kids, the whole family, Jamie Foxx and her husband Stefan, and Maceo and Van, which was one of the greatest experiences for me, just having the kids running around and doing the interview after they played a bunch of tunes and played Go Away and Whole, and then this magical performance at a church. I think it was in Niagara Falls. I can't remember exactly the church that it was, but you see a lot of videos of Jen Chapin doing gigs at churches online, and I didn't tell her this on in the interview that you guys saw, but she's got this tremendous following on Instagram. She's not even on Instagram, but she's got a great following of people that have been hashtagging Jen Chapin for years and putting little clips of her performances and pictures of her up there. So I'm looking forward to, she's going to send me some email me a few of her tunes, which we'll probably splice in. This is going out right now to the Facebook audience, obviously, and then we've got a tighter shot with a little bit better mic'd version of this that will be available on YouTube. You can catch us on YouTube, the Jim Fannon Show on Facebook. We're just starting to work the Instagram angle. I've never hardly spent much time on it, but actually it's been paying off quite nicely for people that have followed us. Thank you very much. And then we're on all the iTunes or the podcast network, Stitcher, FM, whatever it is, on most of those platforms. So you can find this a few days. Well, usually I get it up the same day. So we'll have this up on YouTube probably today. Once I get Jen's music, we're going to splice some music in between maybe some of the conversation. And appreciate your time. So it's Sunday now at 1:35. I guess we had Jen for just over an hour. Thanks again to Jen Chapin for her generosity with the time. She's always been such a great conversation, and today, wow, did we get deep into the politics, and wow, she's got an impressive take on just about everything. So Why Hunger is one of the organizations she's involved with. Amazed to find out that she went back to school, got her master's, and is now teaching high school. I think I failed to get the actual name, but she's in Brooklyn, New York, the daughter of the legend Harry Chapin from Cats in the Cradle and Taxi, and she's really come a long way in making her own legendary music. And yeah, so check her out online on Facebook and YouTube, and we will be in touch soon. Peace out.